In World War II, Romania couldn't decide whose side to be on, so they kept switching. In 1940, Romania looked at the map and panicked. The Soviets grabbed land in the east, Hungary carved off Transylvania in the west, and Bulgaria took the south. Romania was being dismantled, piece by piece, so they made a desperate bet to join Hitler. Maybe Nazi Germany could protect what was left. Romania sent over 600,000 soldiers to invade the Soviet Union, more than any Axis ally except Italy. And their oil fields at Ploiești were fueling the entire Nazi war machine, Germany's lifeline. But by 1944, things had changed. Soviet tanks were closing in on Bucharest, and Romania's young King Michael had had enough. He pulled the boldest move in the war, arrested his pro-Nazi prime minister, and switched to the Allies overnight. Romanian troops literally turned their guns around, fighting the Germans they'd been marching with just hours earlier. Hitler was furious. He ordered the Luftwaffe to bomb Bucharest, but it was too late. That sudden switch cut the war in Europe shorter by 6 months. Without Romanian oil, Germany's engines and its army began to sputter. But the cost, over 700,000 Romanians died trying to pick the right side, from neutral to Nazi ally to Soviet puppet in just 4 chaotic years. Romania didn't just switch sides, but it flipped the course of the war.
Thank you for joining me today. I can see this volume is going to be a little bit weird today, but hey, doing the best we can, right? So I need to make these shows smaller, so I didn't want to end up like with that Israel show. So welcome to the show today. I broken it into 3 parts, actually. This first one, we're going to focus more on the Romani, the people over there. Funny thing happened with those people. Then the next one, we'll be talking about CSAM. CSAM means Child Sexual Abuse Materials. Then we're going to be covering the data centers. I started off with one big file about the crimes of Silicon Valley with the CSAM and the data centers, and well, it just became too much, so I broke it apart. And they're all hiding a very, very significant lie within them all. So anyway, first, you listened to a clip about Romania, right? Funny that Romania would play all sides during the war. Gee, isn't that just interesting, right? They also tricked the Armenians, but I'll have more about that when I get back with those orphan train kids. But before I get started, why did I take my show about Silicon Valley and whip it around to Romania? Well, interesting story. I haven't really engaged much in that Eric, or the deal with Charlie Kirk and all that, just kind of out of the peripheral of my eye. Frankly, those things are just meant to destroy your time and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, let's face it, there was no crime scene secured afterwards. But anyways, one thing that has come out that I found very interesting. Now, I don't have all the facts on it. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm just saying that this is what got me going on Romania, and I thought I have got to open that file that I have on Romania and look through some of those maps and stuff. So what there is chatter about is this, that Erica girl, who's the wife of Charlie Kirk, the guy who's supposedly dead, well, that whole thing with the WWE funeral and all that stuff, right? I mean, look at Trump. He reminds me of a televangelist. He really does. Everything about him looks like a televangelist, right? So anyway, she's as phony as can be. I mean, she literally intersects with Trump and his beauty pageant world and all that kind of stuff. So likely she was introduced from Trump to Charlie. That's how they got going. But anyway, all that stuff is nothing I'm that concerned about. It's all just a big psyop, right? And they love to do those things, and they do them around sloppily because it just keeps people more engaged, right? So while you're looking at all of that stuff, I was over here figuring out Romania, right? Because during that whole bluster, I only watched like maybe 2 different segments on the whole thing. They talked about Romania, and my ears perked up. And what they were talking about was just that Erica Kirk, the widow wife of Charlie Kirk, after she won this beauty pageant in Arizona that connects to Trump's beauty pageant world that he was involved in. She wins a beauty pageant right out of the chute. She never involved in beauty pageant. You have to understand, a lot of these people are intelligence, okay? Her mom and all of them trace to the DOD and all of that. Our military doesn't just employ people wearing uniforms. It employs creeps like her family. So, but anyways, not the subject for today. But so anyways, her family has deep Department of Defense and military backgrounds there already. So anyhow, so they said that after this winning this beauty pageant, which is all of a sudden never entered a beauty pageant, she enters one and she wins, right? I think it was Phoenix or somewhere. But anyway, so then at 17 years old, she was running a child orphanage in Romania. And by that point, I was like just all eyes, right? All eyes and ears on that deal. So all I could really figure out was that the U.S. military was involved because I'll just read you. I just pulled some. I just pulled the transcript from one of the shows I listened to. Okay, and it said, so she's over in Romania at 17, and evidently her mom is there too. So her and her mom head over to Romania, and they set up this orphanage, and it's called. I have the name and all down here, but anyway, so. While they're there in Romania setting up this orphanage, they decided that they were doing these Christmas things. And what they were going to do was have soldiers that were working on a NATO base, good morning Brussels, right there in Romania, deliver these presents for these Romanian kids. And this is what they said. It said, and that NATO base just so happened to have a child brothel. And there's that pesky little fact that we don't actually know how involved the military was because they decided to not document anything involving their involvement with the nonprofit organization. And if you know anything about the military or have served in the military, you know not documenting literally anything that any soldier does is a big-ass no. But somehow she was able to get away with it. And yeah, Erica's mom all of a sudden decided she wanted nothing to do with this organization and tried to pretend she had nothing to do with it. And I can see why. If you're recruiting soldiers from a military base that had a child brothel on it and your nonprofit organization was right down the street. But like I said in my last video, it was a point of emphasis for Lori, that's her mother, to brag about her co-founding this organization with Erica, which would make sense because Erica was basically a kid and a young adult when this nonprofit in another country was founded. Oh well, there's that in the fact that the promotional video for the nonprofit, Flora's voice is literally the narrator. So I believe that we all have angels in our lives, and these are my little angels. This is what they're narrating on the thing. Flora, I don't know who Flora is. This person, Flora, said. So there's that. I believe that we all have angels in our lives, and these are my little angels. And they're from Antonio Placement Center in Constanța, Romania. Our goal with the Romanian Angels project was to show these children the true American heart during the holiday season. And what better way to do that than having our U.S. military personally deliver the gifts? And I'm continuing to read what he's saying. So given all the information I just told you, do you think it might make more sense that Erica just so happened to meet Charlie Kirk in Israel because her and her mom were on a pilgrimage? Or was her mom there on a work trip and they just happened to meet Charlie Kirk? And then they said, and yes, a Air Force Two pulled up and took Charlie Kirk's body before an autopsy could be done, despite this being totally contrary to how Utah handles homicides. And then he said they didn't even do an autopsy. So yeah, so I got very interested in Romania, right? And of course, I love NATO. I'm a big fan of NATO. The saddest moment for me was when I got kicked off of Facebook recently. Well, I got like a 3-month suspension. And I used to follow the NATO page there on Facebook. So NATO, I'm no longer a valued member of your people following you there on Facebook, because I do actually, I'm very, very interested in NATO and all the things you guys are up to over there, right? Because, yeah, no, just little things that have drawn my attention your way. Like, when I figured out that the Netherlands corridor, for all the pornography and the drugs and stuff was coming to the Netherlands, but it routed right up through Brussels, right where my friends at NATO are. So yes, NATO, I do care about you, and I'm just trying to tell you a little bit more of your history today. So anyway, so I popped open my Romania files, and well, lo and behold, doing root cause research really helps out, right? Well, before the war, it was called the Kingdom of Romania, and of course that immediately got my attention, right? I'm thinking kingdom, huh? Romanovs, the Habsburgs. So anyway, so I dug in a little bit of history, and everything will be over on my website, because some of it I will go through in great detail today, and the rest of it you're going to have to look for yourself, because I'm just showing you in my show notes all the things that I looked at to get to this point. So should you be interested in taking it further, you can see how I got here and then move on from here. So anyway, so in 1881, nice years, 1881, Romania, previously a principality under the Ottoman Empire, became an independent kingdom under King Carol, C-A-R-O-L, the first. Yeah, Carol, like the woman Carol, right? So anyway, so then there was some territory expansion after World War I. In 1918 to 1920, Romania annexed Transylvania. Transylvania's in the picture. Bukovina and Bessarabia, creating the Greater Romania. I wondered for years about Transylvania, because King Charles has mentioned Transylvania in his past. So by the 1930s, Romania was a mid-sized European kingdom with about 19 million people. The monarchy was constitutional, but politics were unstable. Well, yeah, of course, it's our gypsies are there, right? The Romanians, with frequent changes of government. Probably a lot of murders too, right? So anyway, so then in the 1930s, there was an authoritarian turn. And that was when King Carol, same woman's name, the second, reigned from 1930 to 1940s. In 1938, he suspended the Constitution, dissolved political parties, and established a royal dictatorship among the growth of the fascist Iron Guard and international tension. So let's get to this little part about their war. The clip you heard, it now makes a lot of sense why Romania played neutral during World War II. So 1939 and the onset of World War II, Romania tried to remain neutral. Don't they all? Like little Switzerland up there, right? Convenient they were so neutral, right? So Romania tried to remain neutral at the start of the war, which would have been September 1939. Its geopolitical position, rich in oil, bordering both Germany and the USSR, made it strategically crucial. And keep in mind that bordering Germany and USSR. So it had Germany on one side, USSR on the other side. Perfect location, right? And we're going to get to in a minute how they got the German part in there, which is the fascinating part of this whole story. So anyway, so in the mid-1940s, Romania was forced to surrender territory. They surrendered Bessarabia and northern Bukovina to USSR. They surrendered northern Transylvania to Hungary with the Second Vienna Award. They traded southern Dobruja to Bulgaria. So public anger, you notice these people always tend to have a lot of public anger about the time they're ready to do things, right? Public anger and military crisis led to the abdication of King Carol II in September of 1940. His 19-year-old son became King Michael I. So then there was a fascist-leaning military regime under this General Ion person and came to power, And that aligned Romania with Nazi Germany. Okay, it gets interesting. So Romania joined the German invasion of the USSR in 1941. In August of 1944, as the Soviet Red Army approached King Michael I, King Michael I led a coup that overthrew this other person and switched Romania to the Allied side. So the monarchy survived the war, but under Soviet influence. So, under pressure in 1947 from the Soviet-backed communist regime, King Michael I abdicated and went into exile. So then Romania became the People's Republic of Romania, a communist state. So in 1939, Romania was still the Kingdom of Romania, ruled by King Carol II. Within a few years, the kingdom lost territory, changed rulers, and shifted alliances from neutrality to the Axis to the Allies, before the monarchy itself was abolished in 1947. So then I went to look at, well, how did the kingdom get started? Now we're talking about royal people, right? So I wanted to see were there any, people that we've talked about hiding here in their background, right? Because now I was already onto the kingdom deal, right? Never knew Romania was a kingdom. Never knew it was ruled by royal people, right? So then I reeled it back. And then we started hitting some pay dirt. So it took me a while to grasp onto this theory because there were two groups called the Hohenzollern. Hohenzollern. So this Hohenzollern royal group, there were two of them, okay? One group was in Romania and the other group did something else. But keep in mind there were two of them. I propose it was they always played dual operations. So I propose that the two of them that I'll be talking about here in a minute, one was maybe Jewish, maybe one was Gypsy, right? So let's reel this back. And I also dug up some interesting maps over my website to look at how all these territories were laid out back then. So 1859, the principalities of Wallachia and Moldavia unite under Prince Alexander Ion Cuza, forming the basis of modern Romania. So now we got the start, right? So 1862, the United States officially adopts the name Romania with Bucharest as its capital. 1866, Cuza, the guy that set it all up, is forced to abdicate after internal political conflict. They always end up kind of hating each other's guts. So anyways, 1866 in May, same year, but in May, Prince Karl of Hohenzollern, and I'm going to have a tough one with that, so I'll just call it Hohenzollers, okay? So 1866 in May, same year, Prince Karl of Hohenzollern is invited to take the throne. He arrives in Romania as Prince Carol I. Romania at this time is still a vassal of the Ottoman Empire, but is moving toward autonomy. So in 1877 to 78, Romania, led by Carol I, fights alongside Russia in the Russo-Turkish War. And they also declare independence from the Ottoman Empire on May the 10th, 1877. Independence was recognized by the Congress of Berlin in 1878, though Romania is forced to cede southern Bessarabia to Russia in return for Dobruja. So in March of 1881, Romania formally becomes the Kingdom of Romania, and Carol I is crowned the first king. And by the way, I looked at his picture. Well, it's just a sketch, of course, right? Well, it's loaded with things like the Iron Cross and stuff that he's wearing. Okay, so let's take a look at Carol I. Carol I was 1866 to 1914 and was king. That was the years that he lived, but he was king from 1881. And Carol strengthens state institutions and the army. He oversees economic modernization. He leads Romania through the Second Balkan War in 1913, gaining southern Dobruja. He died in 1914 in October, shortly after the outbreak of World War I. So then we have Ferdinand, 1914 to 1927. That was the nephew of Carol I. Initially keeps Romania neutral in World War I, but enters the war on the Allied side in 1916. After the war and treaties of 1918 to 20, Romania achieves the Great Union, and that would be Transylvania, Bukovina, and Bessarabia. They all join Romania. So the Kingdom of Romania, remember, started by Karl I, nearly doubles in size and is often called Greater Romania. So the first reign of Michael I was 1927 to 1930. He becomes king at age 5 after Ferdinand's death. His father, Crown Prince Carol, had earlier renounced his rights due to scandals. Well, of course, probably a few murders and stuff. A regency rules on Michael's behalf. So then Carol II was there from 1930 to 1940. Carol II returns to Romania and restores to the throne in 1930. Noted for personal scandals and political instability. And that's when he suspends the Constitution, does all that stuff. But he abdicates in 1940 amid crisis and goes into exile. And his son, Michael I, becomes king again. You can start to get the idea why I was getting a little confused until I finally narrowed all this stuff down, because it was becoming like a big blur. But here's the real story here. So the Kingdom of Romania lasted 66 years. Isn't that convenient? So the kingdom that they started lasted 66 years, from 1881 to 1947, under the Hohenzollern. It's called the Hohenzollern-Sigmaringen dynasty. Big name, right? So there's this Hohenzollern-Sigmaringen dynasty that we're going to be discussing here, okay? So it presided over the country's independence, unification, modernization, and dramatic territorial shifts. It ended under Soviet pressure and communist takeover after World War II. But here's where it got going, because then I had these two names, Hohenzollern-Sigmaringen dynasties, right? But there were two of them. And that's where I was really stumped for a while, okay? So of this, I'll just call them the Hohenzollerns. That's Hohenzolllerns. Okay, so these Hohenzollerns, there were two of them. I finally figured that out, right? So then I started thinking, well, okay, there were two of them. So do either of them connect to the Habsburgs? Well, the Habsburgs was that ancient Central European Catholic dynasty. And they were emperors for centuries and rulers of Austria-Hungary, right over in that region, right? Well, actually, the Hohenzollerns were a separate Swabian house. It was the Hohenzollern, this branch we're talking about, that was in, well, let me just keep reading here. I don't want to get these Hohenzollern confused in my mind. It took me a long time to get these people unconfused in my head. So these Hohenzollern were a separate Swabian house. They were what was called the Protestant Prussian branch, and they created the German Empire. And at that point, my head kind of spun backwards, right? So right there, these people, this Hohenzollern group, created the German Empire. So And the small Catholic Hohenzollern group later ruled Romania. So the one Hohenzollern group was a Protestant Prussian branch, and they created German Empire. The other group were the ones who then ruled Romania. Okay, got that straight? Okay, so, but they did not spin off from the Habsburgers, so I can find so far. Remember, this is just my work as I'm rolling along here. I don't have any real strong conclusions right at this particular second here. So I couldn't find any direct connection from them and the Habsburgs, okay? These group of people who split into two groups. One group created Germany, and the other group ended up in Romania, which makes it all very, very interesting, right? So, but then they did interconnect with other royal families, but that was due to strategic marriages, not a single origin thing. So there were two distinct branches of the Hohenzollern. The Hohenzollern family was an old noble family from Swabia in southern Germany. In the Middle Ages, the family split into Franconian, Brandenburg, Prussian branch, became Protestant, ruled Brandenburg and later Kingdom of Prussia. This branch provided the kings who united Germany. And then we had the Hohenzollern Sigmaringen branch. They remained Catholic, and they did two principalities. So, but this branch was the one that gave that King Carol person Romania. So one of these two groups set up Germany. So this is where Germany enters in the picture. So founding of the German Empire. The unification of Germany in 1871 was led by the Prussian branch of Hohenzollern. King Wilhelm I of Prussia became the first German empire, the Kaiser. Chancellor Otto von Bismarck of Prussia was the political architect of unification. And here's where it gets interesting. The German Empire was proclaimed in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles after Prussia's victory over France. And I've talked about that Hall of Mirrors in the past. They literally signed treaties in a room called the Hall of Mirrors. I think because it was all a big trick, right? So it's interesting to find out that this deal about Germany was also signed in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles. So, so I'm gonna go past some of this because it leads to some confusion if I get too much. So I'm just gonna read just a little bit, okay? First, we're going to talk about Romania's Hohenzollern. That was one group. The other group was the group who founded Germany, okay? So the Romanian group, the Romania Hohenzollern, Prince Karl of Hohenzollern became Carol I of Romania in 1866, 5 years after the German Empire was created. He came from the Catholic Swabian branch, not the Prussian one. While related far back in the family tree, the Romanian kings were essentially a cadet branch of a cadet branch. So they didn't have, supposedly, they didn't have anything to do with Germany, the group that was in Romania. But the Prussian Hohenzollern, that is Wilhelm I, you know, the reason they started World War I, right? So the Prussian Hohenzollern, Wilhelm I, Frederick III, and Wilhelm II were the founders and emperors of Germany. And the Romanian Hohenzollern, Carol I, Ferdinand I, Carol II, Michael I, were a different branch invited to rule Romania in 1866. Romania's monarchy and the founding of Germany were parallel 19th century developments within two separate branches of the same distant family. So, therefore, it's not accurate to say Germany was founded by the Prussian branch. No, but both dynasties shared distant medieval roots but acted independently in their own states, or so the story goes, right? So they started off, the Hohenzollern dynasty indeed had two major early modern branches. The Brandenburg Prussian branch, they were originally burgraves of Nuremberg, electors of Brandenburg, and kings of Prussia. That group was also Protestant in religion after the Reformation. That group also produced King Wilhelm I of Prussia, Emperor Wilhelm II, and the other rulers of the German Empire. This is the branch that led Germany unification in 1871. So then we have the other group, the Hohenzollern, which I'm just calling, it's a big name, it's like called the Swabian Hohenzollern branch, so I'm just calling them the Hohenzollers Romanians, okay, because you can understand, in looking at all these words, it became quite a buzz in my brain for a while before I figured out that, no, wait a minute, there's two of them, right? So anyway, so this group, the Swabian Hohenzollern Secretary branch, or also known as the Romanian Hohenzollern, was a much smaller Catholic princely house in southern Germany. That's where they came from. But they were never a major power in Germany. So from this line came Prince Karl of Hohenzollern, invited by Romania to become Prince Carol I of Romania in 1866, later crowned King of Romania in 1881. So yeah, so I have all the information you want to know. So yeah, so out of these groups came Germany, right? One group basically started Germany, sort of, and Wilhelm was the first German emperor. So yeah, that was how Germany got going. I found that very, very interesting because also I remember King Charles of the UK has publicly mentioned his personal connections to Transylvania, the historic region in central Romania. So here's what that means. King Charles has ancestral ties to the rulers of Transylvania through his father's side. The connection comes mainly through Queen Mary of Teck, wife of King George V, Charles's great-grandmother, and further back to the noble families of Central Europe, including the Transylvanian-born 15th century prince Vlad III, that Vlad the Impaler. This ancestry is distant and genealogical, not a political link. Many European royals share medieval ancestors because of centuries of intermarriage among noble houses. So, since the early 1990s, King Charles, has been a frequent visitor to Transylvania. He became interested in the region's traditional Saxon and Hungarian villages, historical architecture, and biodiversity-rich rural landscapes. Through his Prince of Wales Foundation and later the King's Foundation, he has supported the restoration of Saxon heritage houses, sustainable farming, conservation of forests and wildflower meadows. Charles has sometimes referred to himself humorously as being a descendant of Vlad the Impaler because of that distant lineage. He has also called Transylvania a place of deep ancestral roots for him and has promoted its natural and cultural heritage to draw positive attention to Romania. These remarks are cultural and personal. So, yeah. So what is the context about Dracula, Vlad III? Vlad III, or Dracula, lived supposedly 1431 to 1476, was a Wallachian prince, not a Habsburg or Hohenzollern. He fought to defend his land from the Ottomans. Transylvania itself was for centuries under Hungary, then Habsburg rule, and joined Romania only in 1918. So here we have a Habsburg connection, right? Because Transylvania connects it. So the British royal family connection is purely through the interwoven noble bloodlines of Europe. So yeah, the land that is now Romania, the north of the lower Danube and around the capital mountains. Its ancient times, it was home to the Dracians. So yeah, a little bit further back, I'm going to go on those Dracian people. But anyway, so you see all these connections are really starting to pile up, right? In Transylvania, west of the Carpathians, a mix of Romanians, Hungarians, and Germans lived under the Kingdom of Hungary, and later under the Habsburgs. And Vlad, the Dracula person, is the most famous one from that area. So yes, this is just chock full of their old memories of towns, right? And like I said, I've got every single bit of it step by step, because it took me really going step by step to first sort out, wait a minute, there were two groups? Yeah, so, and then when I read the part about the founding of Germany, then I had to reel way back, okay, so let me get down here. And so, yeah, Russia at that time was still bigger than Romania. I looked into all that. So then we got interesting. I don't know how I stumbled upon this when I was looking at all these Halston wires and all these people, but somehow I ran across this little factoid, which actually about popped the back of my head off. Romania was one of the largest single European sources of Jewish immigration to Israel after 1948. So, there were other major countries. Poland, 250,000 Jews. Soviet Union, very large, but mainly 1970s over a million. Hungary and Czechoslovakia together contributed tens of thousands after 1948 and after the 1956 Hungarian uprising. So very large communities like Iraq, Yemen, Morocco, Egypt, Tunisia immigrated in the 1950s to 60s. But this is key. In the first decade after Israel's founding, Romanian Jews were among the largest European group to immigrate. Pretty interesting, huh? Because Romania played a central early role in supplying Jewish immigration to Israel in the immediate post-war decades. It was one of the largest European sources in the 1948 to 1970 period. This migration profoundly shaped both the Romanian Jewish community, which shrank drastically, and Israel's early demographic. So yeah, they moved out of Romania into Israel. Pretty clear picture, right? So anyway, Romania's geopolitical crisis in World War II. Let me see. Yeah, I've got it all down below, how they twisted all this land around. And, yeah, so then in 1945, they called it the Royal Coup, when the Romanians switched sides again. It was another thing interesting. No other group that I've ever read about, except for these Romanians, just switched sides so many times during a war, right? I mean, it was almost like it was planned, right? I mean, I could certainly argue that. So by the summer of 1944, the Soviet Red Army advanced into Romania. In the same summer, August 23rd, 1944, King Michael I organizes a coup d'etat, and they arrest the pro-Nazi prime minister, and they declared Romania's armistice with the Allies. Romania forces switch sides overnight, turning against the German troops still in the country. So Germany retaliated with the Luftwaffe bombing raids on Bucharest, but cannot reverse events. So Romania's defection deprived Germany of oil, a vital lifeline for its military. The Allied and Soviet leaders later assessed that Romania's switch shortened the European war by almost 6 months. Romanian troops subsequently fought alongside the Red Army against Germany in Transylvania, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. And then Romania lost around 700,000 people in World War II, soldiers and citizens combined. The country emerged in 1945 devastated, occupied by Soviet troops, and within a few years became a communist satellite of the USSR. The Holocaust of Romanian-controlled territories claimed hundreds of thousands of Jewish and Roma lives. The war years left a legacy of trauma, demographic loss, and political instability. So Romania went from neutral to Axis ally to co-belligerents of the Allies, were driven by survival amid territorial losses and geopolitical pressure. The August 1944 switch was one of the most dramatic political turnarounds of the war and significantly hurt Germany's ability to continue fighting. This episode underscores Romania's strategic importance in Eastern Europe, especially because of its oil reserves and geopolitical position. The persecution of Roma people, often called gypsies in older sources by Nazi Germany and its allies, was not about Romania's military decisions in World War I. It was supposedly rooted in the Nazi racial ideology that viewed Roma, like Jews, as racially inferior and a threat to the supposed purity of the German nation. Beginning in the 1930s, the German regime passed laws restricting Roma involvement, sterilizing many, and sending thousands to concentration camps. And keep in mind, it was the Romanian branch of those Hohenzollern people that started Germany, right? They're always playing two sides, so, I think they probably just ethnic cleanse themselves, right? Well, let's just get rid of all these cousins we don't like and stuff. Let's just act like we're this group. So historians often call the Nazi murder of Roma the pogrom, the devouring. So after 1941, as German forces advanced east, Romas were rounded up and murdered by mobile killing squads or deported to camps such as Auschwitz and Belzec. In Auschwitz, an entire section, the Gypsy family camp, was set aside for Roma. Most of its inmates were killed in 1944. Estimates of Romas killed by the Nazis and their allies range from 220,000 to 500,000, roughly 1/4 to 1/2 of all the Roma in Europe. Yeah, it could be something as simple as they were cleaning their own house, right? So Romania under Marshal I. Person, while allied in Germany, did not deport most Roma citizens to Nazi camps in occupied Poland. Instead, Romanian authorities deported tens of thousands of Roma and Jews from Bessarabia and Bukovina in the occupied territory of Transița, which was Transylvania, where many died from exposure, starvation, and disease. This was part of Romania's own anti-Semitic and anti-Roma policies, not direct retaliation by Germany, nor Romania's later defection to the Allies. They claim the brutality toward the Romas in the Nazi camps was driven by the Nazi regime's racial ideology, which put them in the same category as the Jews, the Slavs, and others. So, so we got them there, right? I'm going to be taking a break here and put this on hold. Okay. plug in this thing, get something new. But anyway, so I miss the old days. I had a show producer, and he would monitor the sound so you didn't get all of a sudden screeching and loud stuff. But you know, I'm also trying to encourage you not to be using earbuds also. So maybe it's for the good, right? You're so worried about my shows that you have to resort to using something besides those earbuds so I don't blast you with the inconsistent audio. So there's always an upside to everything, right? So anyway, so then I took a look at, do the Romani, or the Roma people, connect to the Habsburgs? And yes, the history of the Romani and the Habsburg monarchy is deeply intertwined. The Habsburgs ruled much of Central and Eastern Europe, including Transylvania, and later all of present-day Romania, except Moldavia and Wallachia for a time. And their policies had a long-lasting impact on Roma communities. So, how did that get started? Well, the Romas entered Europe from the Balkans beginning in the 14th century. By the 15th to 16th century, Roma groups were present throughout the Habsburg realms: Austria, Bohemia, Moravia, Hungary, and Transylvania. In the Romanian principalities, which are Wallachia and Moldavia, which were not under Habsburg rule until later, Romas were largely enslaved by monasteries, boyars, and the state. So 1690 to 1711, the Habsburgs gained control over Transylvania after the defeat of the Ottoman Empire in the region. So then Roma communities in Transylvania thus came under Habsburg Austrian administration. The Habsburgs regarded the Romas as a separate social category, often nomadic, and initially taxed them as such. So, so clearly right there, and it started with these people in the 1780s. They came up with these big programs to try to get the Romas to settle, get them to come with regular names. So, after Joseph II, enforcement of the assimilation laws weakened, but Roma in the Habsburg realms, including Transylvania, were gradually became settled villages, artisans, and musicians, yet still subject to local prejudice and periodic restrictions. Transylvania remained under Habsburg, then Austro-Hungarian rule until the end of World War I. So, after World War I in 1918, Transylvania became part of Greater Romania after the collapse of Austria-Hungary. Romania in Transylvania now becomes part of the Romanian state, joining long-established Roma communities in the Old Kingdom of Wallachia and Moldavia. And clearly, somebody's going to need to put together this huge timeline. Will that somebody be me? Well, I kind of doubt it, and I'll be talking about that more later down the road. So anyways, so I've got all the data if anybody wants to try to timeline all this. But for today, I'm just sharing my raw data. I don't have timelines all organized in that same fashion. But down the road, this clearly needs to all be put into a major timeline. So anyways, the Habsburg era in Transylvania marked the shift from mostly itinerant, often marginalized populations to partly settled village communities. So assimilation policies had lasting effects. There was a loss of traditional language and culture in some areas, but also integration into rural trades and crafts. But of course, the Romas continued to face social and economic marginalization under successive regimes. The Habsburgs, Hungarian, Romania, and later communists, they're always the victims. If you're looking for a good victim, look for a Roma or a Jew. So the Habsburg monarchy shaped the Roma experience in Transylvania through early modern efforts at forced settlement and assimilation. These policies set the stage for the later social positions of Roma in the region. When Transylvania joined Romania in 1918, the Roma population there brought with it its legacy of 2 centuries of Habsburg administration. Distinct from the history of Roma slavery and later emancipation in Wallachia and Moldavia. So yes, the Romans were also under the Habsburg rule. So yeah, Roma groups arrived in Central Europe from the Balkans, blah blah blah. Yeah, the Habsburgs took control of Transylvania. Yeah, so it's all here if anybody wants to look any further. That connection is pretty clear if you ask me. So let's take a look at what is going on now. I will be talking next about the CSAM. That means child sex abuse materials is a global problem. But European reporting hotlines and Europol investigations, they highlight this. High-income countries with high internet penetration, like the UK, Germany, Netherlands, Nordic states, as having the largest number of detected cases because they have active reporting systems. If you call them active, I question that, but anyway, that's what they're saying, right? But then Central and European countries, including Romania, Poland, Hungary, Bulgaria, report fewer detected cases, but are believed to have substantial underreporting. Romania has recorded cases of both sextortion and online grooming of minors or children. Romanian police cooperate with Europol's European Cybercrime Center and the U.S. agencies like HSI and the FBI to investigate. So, Romania is where all of the filth with the children, with all of their bodies being moved, the transporting, all of that, right? So, I'm just going to be talking about some of the basics right now, but I'm going to keep it as basic and as simple as I can. So the main forms of child trafficking in the EU, that means out of Romania, sexual exploitation. By far, the most prevalent for girls involves grooming, online recruitment, transport to Western EU cities, forced labor, particularly in agriculture, construction, hospitality, manufacturing, and domestic work. Children are also forced to beg in petty crimes, often involving younger children or children from marginalized Roma families. Children are forced into criminality and online exploitation, including forced shoplifting, pickpocketing, and production of child sex abuse material, or the CSAM. So where's this all happening? Well, it's interesting that the country these people left to go to Israel ended up having this issue, right? Gee, what a just a coincidence, right? What a huge coincidence. So, where's the trafficking patterns? Western and Northern EU countries, Germany, number 1, UK, France, Italy, Spain, Netherlands, Austria, Nordic countries are the primary destinations for trafficked children. Eastern EU countries like Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, and non-EU neighbors like Moldavia and Ukraine serve mainly as sources and sometimes as transit points. Nigerian victims often enter the EU via North Africa, Italy, Spain, and then move to other EU states. There's the EU Anti-Trafficking Directive, which started in 2011, obliges all EU member states to have laws protecting children victims, victim-centered investigations, and penalties for traffickers. There's this thing called GRETA, G-R-E-T-A. It evaluates each Council of Europe member state regularly for compliance with the Trafficking Convention. We have Europol and joint investigation teams. They enable cross-border police cooperation against trafficking networks. Despite these frameworks, identification rates for child victims remain low compared to estimated prevalences. Well, go listen to my show about the fact that they're doing snuff films, and I had a guy from Scotland Yard, the head of Scotland Yard, sat there with a straight face and said, nobody in law enforcement has ever heard of snuff films. Yeah, they just lie about all these things to keep it going, right? That's exactly how it happens. So what ends up happening is Romania and Bulgaria remain the largest EU sources of child victims, especially for sexual exploitation, but also show steady legal reform and institutions. No, due to EU and NATO alignment. Yeah, this is what the pitch is. Well, look, there's a NATO base right there. We're there to fix this problem. If you believe that, I think we need to talk further. So, Hungary has a similar profile, but slightly fewer victims reported abroad. Still a significant source. Moldova remains highly vulnerable as a non-EU poor neighbor with large out-migration. Nigeria is the leading non-European source for child sex trafficking victims in the EU. Western EU countries have stronger institutions and higher victim service capacities, but continue to host the bulk of the demand in destination markets. And of course, we have this phenomenon that's going on right now, the phenomena of children filming themselves in bedrooms for sexual content is real and rising globally. I'll be getting much more into that in the next show, but yes, I went looking for who right now, I went looking for what countries does the pornography and all this sex stuff originate from, because people can tell by their IP addresses and stuff what countries are spreading the porn, let's put it this way, okay, and the child trafficking. But what's really interesting is that, it's all over, and so I was looking for, after the Pornhub thing with those kids, and Pornhub got caught having people uploading child pornography, and they're like, whoops, we got caught. Then this new deal is just mind-boggling. And here's what it is. The number one source, and you're hearing me correctly because I looked and I looked and I looked. I could not believe it to begin with, right? Is actually, it's not adult entertainment sites like Pornhub anymore. It's actually children filming themselves in bedrooms for sexual content. And I think it's probably happening in two ways. And you're going to think, oh boy, here she goes. Here's what I think is happening. I think a lot of it is probably happening out of that Romania area. Just an instinct. So much going on in that area, right? And this children in the bedroom business, I think it's probably two things. There probably are groups, gangs of these mafia people going around the internet on places like Facebook and these places and recruiting children. And once you get a child to commit some sort of sexual act on camera, then all you have to do is say, hey, kid, I'm going to tell everybody, right? Controlling children is not complicated stuff, right? So some of these children in bedroom things could be coming from children who are actually in bedrooms and mom and dad are in another part of the house, right? So they're living in a house with mom and dad. They're off in their room alone, which is another reason not to have kids alone in rooms. But anyways, they're off in their rooms alone. So this content is appearing. These children are showing up in bedroom settings. Well, I think it would be highly possible for them to set up those bedroom settings for children that were stolen, that were being forced to perform these sexual acts in front of cameras. And why not make it all in Romania, right? So it would be very cost effective. So you have a building or some place to house all these children, right? They go to work in their bedroom where they also live, pretty cost effective, right? You can control all these kids because you got access to their rooms. It's all in one big building somehow. And these kids could produce a lot of money because you keep them alive for as long as you can, because each one of them may be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it could be 2 tracks this is taking, and I'll be getting more into that in my next segment after I get through this one. So according to these people who I consider pretty suspect, like Scotland Yard and all these so-called rescue groups, they claim it follows patterns of internet use and platform availability. So they also claim that Romania faces the same risks as other EU states, with some added vulnerability among marginalized youth, but is not singled out as the top source country. See, nobody knows where is the top source country for these bedroom kids, right? It's because I think there's 2 different groups, and I also think nobody's really looking, right? So yeah, so they got these kids in the bedroom. So Romania today is the top spot for child trafficking. It was home to Jews and Gypsies. The Jews that were in Romania before going to Israel were Ashkenazi Jews. I suspect the area is a hot spot because my best buddies at NATO and the U.S. military are there. But this is the root, and could be the root, of where these people traveled from to get to Israel out of Romania. So the same area, Romania, where the majority of the people going into Israel, just happens to now have a NATO facility, U.S. military there, and all this supposed stuff going on with children, right? So anyway, so I'm going to scroll down here because I have way too much of this other geographic stuff. But anyway, so yeah, so why does it end up being that Romania, which was one of the largest single source countries of Jewish immigrants to Israel after World War II, they shaped Israel's demographic and cultural profile while leaving only a small Jewish remnant in Romania. So how did these armed forces get involved? Well, NATO. 1994, Romania joined NATO. Partnership for Peace. 1999, granted NATO over flight rights during the Kosovo campaign. 2002, Romania was invited to become a full NATO member. Now, wasn't that convenient? So in 2004, they had accession to NATO. 2004 to 2007, it's the Makali Kakagaksi Air Base served as a key U.S. allied hub for operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, right there in Romania. 2007, joined the EU, accelerating institutionalizing reforms. Yeah, by the time they got caught with all those orphanage kids. 2011, they signed an agreement with the U.S. for the Aegis Offshore Missile Defense Site. 2016, this missile defense site becomes operational. 2020, Romania hosts NATO battle groups and allied exercises in response to Russian aggression in the Black Sea region. So supposedly Romania is free, right? Well, let's look at some of their past there in the post-communist transition. 1989, the fall of this regime exposed neglected state orphanages holding tens of thousands of children. I remember that like it was yesterday. I think it was 60 Minutes or one of them did a documentary of all of those children, which brings up a key point. Where did all of those children come from? Were they all just tossed out by their families? And they claim in 1990s there was a surge in international adoptions, mainly poorly regulated, and emergence of trafficking networks. So gee, imagine that. They discover all these horrible cases of neglected state orphanages, and that opens up to international adoptions. Ching, 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 hear the money going? 2004, they curtailed most foreign adoptions and began EU-driven foster care and deinstitutional reforms. 2007 EU accession, and that strengthened their child protection system. So they actually are claiming that in 2007, because when they joined the EU, it strengthened their child protection systems. Now, I am doing everything I can to hold myself back from hysterically screaming at this point, okay? None of this is true. Yeah, sure, they joined the EU and they claim they got child protective systems. So why, as of 2025, is Romania the #1 sex exploitation? I would argue because all of the reforms they put into place, like moving NATO there, moving the U.S. military there, that became the process to support the system and get it going. So now it's #1. Without their so-called helpful hands, why do I always say evil has to come packaged as help? So without the help, and this is only my opinion from my suspicious mind, they moved in the assets like NATO in them, because how are you going to fly those kids around? If you want to be the #1, you got to have some planes, right? You can't just fly them on commercial planes. You got to load up planes with them, right? NATO and the U.S. military happen to have a lot of airplanes, huh? So they say that it's typical to recruit because of all the poverty there and everything going on. Well, Romania has criminalized trafficking, but it cooperates with Europol and the U.S. with HSI and FBI. Well, you see their support groups are pretty shaky, right? So I've got it all listed down below. So self-generated child sexual abuse, or the CSAM, has surged globally since 2020. They claim it's mostly girls, but it's increasingly also the boys. It is the highest reporting in high internet penetration countries with strong hotlines. So yeah, this is another thing. They put in the military in Romania, they put in these hotlines. The hotlines are just a way to trigger kids to report things, right? The UK did these hotlines, I can't remember the name of them, run by these demons over there, and these hotlines were actually to trap the children, right? You get the kids to call in and say, hey, so-and-so is a pedophile, and then they know what the kids know, right? And then in every cases of the child hotline in the UK, and remember I'm going from memory here, those kids were all set up into a trap. So I can only surmise that these hotlines, the military gave the appearance of things are changing, right? But how does it remain so high with all of these checks in place? Well, because I have a few cases you might want to take a look at. Supposedly, there was a Spain-Romania network in 2021. There were 16 house searches. France-Romania network 2024, 8 suspects arrested. Ireland, Romania, 19 house searches, seizures of phones, laptops, bank cards in Ireland, Romania, UK, private dwellings, yeah. And then we had Andrew Tate. Talk about somebody broadcasting what they were doing. Andrew Tate had that alleged lover boy coercion for online content. He had it set up in private residences. These women lived in those same rooms. So I don't see it as a stretch to think that, well, these people could be placed in those rooms. They live in those rooms, and that is how it works, right? Think about the money they save. They don't have to have good lighting because, after all, just some kid in the bedroom, right? And it probably feeds to one of their sicknesses, in this sickness of these psychopaths, to see a vulnerable child in a bedroom, right? And so you can have cheap decoration. Hey, you don't have to worry about lighting. Hey, you can even have my quality audio and nobody would care, right? Because you set up a cheap, efficient thing, so each kid makes the most money. So Romania is a NATO and EU member with U.S. allied military presence for security. I would say it is there to keep the trafficking going. The region, once home to large Ashkenazi Jewish and Roma populations, was easily shaped by persecution and marginalization, and now they struggle with the legacy of poverty and weak child protection. making it a persistent source region for trafficking victims. So I believe it's because it was able to happen, and it just is mighty suspicion that it happened in that one particular area where the majority of the Israeli people came out of, right there in Eastern Europe. So I have a lot of examples about children were placed in mass institutions all over this country. A lot of these early mental institutions, I did shows about that years ago, and what I discovered during that was a lot of the early mental institutions were actually likely huge estates, big fancy estates that they changed into mental institutions. And basically, I'm going from memory here, but I recorded it all. Basically what they did was they took these old mansions, big huge estates, they converted them to nut houses and mental wards to lock people up, and the front part of the institutions remained like the mansion state, and then they built backward from there. So in the front part is where the mansion was, and that's where the staff and all of them lived, and the building they were doing behind these mansions was for where they'd warehouse all of these people, right? So they have had a long history of putting us into different places and managing us, right? Buildings, this and that. So I don't see it as a stretch at all that these people were putting kids in bedrooms and working them like slaves day to day, over and over, doing sex things online. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. A traffic victim, let's say if you're not you or me, but let's say a sad story about somebody that gets stolen and trafficked for sex, those people typically are expected to perform between 20 and 50 sexual acts in a day. Imagine that. Just imagine that. Just imagine that. And that is because of these psychopaths. So you have to question why from that area is all this happening. Well, because it is the plan, not the bug in the system. And like I always say, evil has to come packaged as help. So yeah, hey, we're coming in to help you, Romania. We're flying in NATO. Look ahead, planes, jets flying in to help you. No, those planes and jets are probably how those poor kids are getting flown out of that country. I'm going to put this a hold for a second. So I don't know what to say. You know, I've already done shows about there's no cross-border sharing, so whatever they're saying is basically politically correct to say and print in a brochure, right? So since 2000, Romania's progress in trafficking, human trafficking, and reforming child protection has been driven by international alignment with the EU, NATO, Greta, and this TIP thing. The legal framework is largely in place, but effective prosecution, comprehensive victim support, and sustained political will remain the key areas where further progress is needed. Many villages face chronic unemployment, poor schools, and inadequate health care. Roma communities face discrimination, high poverty. Poverty and marginalization remains root drivers of both child abandonment and trafficking for recruitment. They have gangs that recruit out of these child protective systems. It is just, I mean, it is beyond endless. And they have low conviction rates. Many trafficking investigations stall. Those convicted often receive suspended or short sentences. There's inconsistent use of victim testimony and evidence. Lack of trauma-informed investigations lead to weak cases. Occasional compression or occasional corruption or complicity, no, I think it's more like the norm, undermines trust. And all these kids, all these years I've been looking at these kids and stuff, right? One thing all these kids have said is, if only somebody had listened to me. A kid, statistically in my mind, and remember, I'm coming up with a statistic, I haven't read it anywhere, I'm just coming up with it all on my own. It appears to me that all it takes is getting a kid to get rejected once, and then that kid shuts up and does what's expected of them. And that is what I found personally in every single case. It is not complicated to control or manage a child. That is why psychopaths are indeed cowards. Only a coward would put a child in this kind of a position. Only a coward would get a thrill out of seeing that level of fear that they must witness in these children's eyes. So there is no safety for these children as long as we stay quiet. These children will get no help from any of these people. NATO is not there to help. No one is there to help. Those planes, I believe, are there to fly children out of there. And I have a list of the bases down below. So they have been operational over there for a suspiciously interesting amount of time, right? And it's also fascinating that it is increasing. And I've got to log off of here and close off this show. So I will be back as soon as I can. I have something major I will be talking about soon. My life on the game board has taken a pretty dramatic change, so I'll be updating you on that. So in the meantime, my goal is this. I've been working on all these files. A lot of these files I haven't shared in all these years because I've been actively working on them. And they're files that I actually have some answers to. I now know where all of those orphan trained children came from, and I need to get the word out. So there's files that I want to share with you. So there's a lot more to do. The files I have are pretty much, I've wrapped up several of the things I've been working on for several years now, and I need to be able to share those with you. So I will be clicking along here. So if you're looking forward to great audio or more organized shows, probably not going to be for you. But I will be unloading all of the data that I have. So hopefully people will be looking further for themselves. Doing it in Romania removes the transport issue. For all we know, it has held that spot of the number one sex spot for children trafficking. For all we know, those children are being transported on NATO planes and U.S. military planes. Think about it. Do they ever go under inspection? No, of course not. That's how they set up this whole trick, right? Put on those fancy uniforms, come up with those jets, come up with borders. All of those things were to manage us, to allow their evil systems to continue. And we all bought into it. We saw those shiny medals and stuff that they all love to wear, and we thought, these are good people, they're protected people. No, we got that wrong. They're psychopaths. Keep in mind right now, they're buying up social media. If they were so smart, if I was running their team, I would have done this years ago. I would have had secret groups. They already have groups on social media, let's not forget it. If they're on the screen, they're probably already on the team, okay? But right now, they're coming out and saying, we need to improve social media. So they are making major investments. So if they were that organized and that smart, they would have done this years ago. I got banned from Facebook because they said I did something, but it was a pretty drastic 3-month ban, but I'm not going to be appealing it. I do not comply, okay? In order to get off of this 3-month ban, seems pretty drastic to me, they want facial recognition. They want you to log on and show your face, your face on a video. Well, first of all, my face would scare anybody right now. I mean, between the missing teeth and all the dirty electricity, radiation exposure I've been under, I look like hell, okay? So, if I could be so blunt. But anyways, so they want people to log on. And they also, in order to get an account, they want you to do this facial recognition. They keep trying it also on YouTube. They say, well, if you want this to be a clickable link, you'll log on and show us your face on video. They're all pushing to show us our faces on video because they're not that organized. They need to gather this data because they never bothered before, okay? So just keep one thing in mind. If you want to take them down, make them lose their investment. Make these sites they're buying ghost towns. Don't play into it. Don't play into it at all. We did fine before social media. Actually, I would argue we probably did a whole lot better. We had ways to communicate. How? I don't know. I can remember pre-Google. during the John Benet Ramsey case, I met people online that one guy sent me by mail all this interesting stuff he dug up about the Ted Bundy trial. We used to, and on a nice day, I'd walk over to the local bookstore, I'd browse around, find a good book to read, so on my next trip, I'd have something to read. We actually did things, okay? And those things included mingling amongst each other, right? And that is how we share information. This is why they want everybody locked up in corners, locked up on teams, because they want you fighting, so you forget to look up and see the evil psychopaths that are destroying the lives of how many children. I tried to get a handle on this. I can't even get close. How many children are being stolen and shipped around and used in bedrooms and stuff? And I have the answer to how they're getting away with it when I come back, but it's too much for me today, so be safe out there and goodbye for now. Export. Sorry, I'm kind of I have to pay very close attention. It's lucky I have some pretty good systems set up, so